Just a gentle note before we begin. Today's conversation includes aging, increased care needs, services, housing decisions, and caregiver stress. Please listen in a way that feels supportive for you. You're welcome to pause and come back at any time. When an older loved one starts needing more support, most caregivers don't get a handbook. They get a slow realization, a fall, a hospital discharge, a stack of forms, a family meeting that turns tense. And then this shift happens. Suddenly, you're not just helping out, you're coordinating, advocating, and making decisions about services, safety, independence, and housing, while trying not to break the relationship in the process. And there's a particular kind of stress that comes with this season, and it isn't always the hands-on care. It's the constant interpreting. One day they're steady, sharp, independent, and you exhale. The next day they're foggy, flat, unsteady, and your body goes straight into, what does this mean? What do I do next? Is this the start of something bigger? You're not just a daughter, son, partner, or grandchild anymore. You're managing risk, carrying the emotional weight of watching someone you love change, and trying to protect dignity while the world pushes you towards quick fixes and big decisions. The line in Your Aging Advantage that I keep coming back to because it names what caregivers already know. A number tells you how long they've lived, but not how they lived, which is much more important. Today's guest is here to bring calm, clear next steps to a moment that can feel like emotional and logistic whiplash. Stuart Kaplan is the CEO of Selfhelp Community Services in New York, supporting more than 25,000 seniors each year through affordable housing and supportive services, including a significant population of Holocaust survivors. He's also the co-author of Your Aging Advantage, the 7 New Stages of Aging, which offers a fresh new way to understand what happens as we get older, including the flicker stage, where someone feels like age can shift forward or backwards, and a framework that reminds us aging is not linear. This episode is for the caregiver who wants to keep their loved ones safe without taking their life away, and who needs a steadier map for services, housing, and the next right step. Stuart, welcome to Radiant Moments.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be with you, Michelle.
Stuart, you work with families who are trying to hold it together when an older loved one starts needing more support. What do family caregivers most often struggle with when supporting an older loved one, especially at the beginning of increased care needs?
Oftentimes, family members are faced with a moment that they weren't expecting. And that is the beginning of what families need to reckon with when a family member gets into or begins a stage which is different than what life has been like before. So, and because I will use the word crisis, but with a small c, it may be something that is a change not only for that individual, but for the entire family. And for family members to recognize that this has occurred and it may impact the whole family, not just a son, a daughter, but maybe grandchildren who are involved, sisters, brothers, and the like, is to take the breath, slow down, and try to meet the individual, the loved one who you're recognizing as having just entered a different stage, meet them where they are. If we could somehow get that message across early on, it would help for what is to follow. Because we see our loved ones in the context that we've known them for a lifetime. And now that is changing, and it could change in an instant, or it could change over time if there's a chronic illness. So helping them to deal with practical, sometimes simple decisions that could have major impacts is very important, and what we're not ready for as caregivers.
But can you tell me a little bit about your background and why you've started this journey and written this book?
So I have been in the field of healthcare administration, social services, social care, medical care, for a lifetime. And it is actually because originally I lived with my grandparents, and I recognized at the time when I was a teenager in my 20s that there was not a coordinated care system for older adults. And as my grandparents needed assistance, said there must be a better way. And so I actually pursued education that allowed me to look at the system of healthcare for older adults, and I recognized there were changes that needed to be made. And so first I began to practice healthcare administration, and then over the years actually work with children and older adults, and then realized that all of the knowledge that I had acquired and the solutions that are possible, both for the older adults or for the caregivers, is something that we could put down in writing and help others. And so the book that I have written, along with my co-author Marcus Riley, is one that not only provides concepts for caregiving, but also how to and what should you do in various stages of life.
And from what I have researched about this journey, you've spoken about the emotional side and the practical side of aging and being a caregiver. What are the most common practical shocks families aren't prepared for?
So that crisis moment that I referred to gently before is one that people are not prepared for. We think that our loved ones will be as they are always. And then at a moment, and this could be a slip and a fall, a bone that is in the wrong place as a result. It could be a cardiac condition, or it could be in a gentle chronic condition that families detect, and the loved one probably detects as well, but isn't always ready to accept, as is the family also not always ready to accept. And so it's not only the surprise itself, but it's what do we do about it? We do not do enough to prepare for that moment. And it may or may not be inevitable. It is in life generally, but not necessarily for any specific individual. And so when it happens, like, where did this come from? What should I do? And I mean, simple things that one might do is just talk with others who have gone through the same experience. Many of these things, while they are unique to your own family and to your own loved one, are not unique to the system of caregiving or medical care or the combination of social care and medical care. And so speaking with others is a very simple thing that people could do. Breaking down the thought process. You don't have to solve the problem all in one fell swoop or overnight when you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning and you feel like. So as a caregiver, you should be gentle to yourself as well. Easier to say than to do because the responsibility feels heavy, but you need to understand that as caregivers, we weren't prepared for that either, just as the individual who is affected wasn't prepared for their breakdown at the moment. And so we need to take care of ourselves. If we don't take care of ourselves, and it's said all the time, who cares for the caregivers? The caregiver could be in line for now being someone who needs to receive care.
Yes, it's setting up the caregiver and the loved one to be part of the care plan so that it's not just solely about the person who's needing the love, support, and care, but it's also about the longevity of the carer because this isn't something generally that happens overnight. It's something that requires a long term investment. What's happening emotionally for the caregiver behind the scene? Even when they look fully capable, they look like they have everything together. What's happening behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, they are seeing somebody very painfully. It's painful to them, but they can't exhibit their pain because they feel like they need to be the strong one because somebody else is in need of specific attention. And so that is debilitating. I mean, it could be depressing, it could be anxiety provoking, and yet not being able to share your emotions, sometimes within the family, but certainly with the individual who is affected, has an internal mental health as well as physical health implications. And so, again, if you can find somebody to speak with, and it is not that difficult, but you do have to make the attempt to find them. It will relieve much of what's going on inside you. They also feel like I'm not able to help. I want to help you, but I don't know how to help you. And so that's a stage where you actually can seek out other resources. Again, this is likely not the first time that somebody is going through this. And so there are resources out there that can help you, and there are people who can help you so that you don't feel like this is all on yourself.
And it's really important for caregivers to understand that needing help themselves and support on this journey is not something to feel guilty guilty about. It's not something that they should feel shame about either. It's something that will help you in the long run to be able to stay steady, to be able to feel regulated, and to have access to a level of calm in the storm that you need. Because as a caregiver, you're expected to advocate, but not so much that it becomes aggressive or combative. You're required to have a range of knowledge accessible at the tip of your fingers. And if you don't, then you're seen to not be caring in a way that is supportive or successful. There's this balance of having to get everything just right. And that support or talking to someone or being part of a community, whatever mode makes you feel safe, is really important to help prevent burnout and also to be able to show up for your loved one in a capacity that is more than if you weren't. You're a better carer when you care for yourself first, because then you're able to show your loved one a level that you are showing yourself and outwardly be able to project that in a loving, caring manner.
When we talk about a caregiver, we talk about it in the singular, but it does not have to be singular. Oftentimes, there are other family members, neighbors, friends, community from your church, synagogue, people who are ready and willing to assist. May not be there full time as you are, again, if it's a loved one and you're living in the house with them, but caregiving should not be singular. To the extent that you can, and again, sometimes you have to exert some effort to make this happen, but there are others who can help, even if it's just for the brief respite, so that you can do what you want to do, whether it's just catch your breath or actually go out and take in a show or do some shopping for yourself, not going shopping for the purpose of the caregiving. So caregiving, we should talk about it as caregivers for each individual, not just caregivers. Generally, of course, there are many caregivers, but you should look to try to make it more of a communal assistance. People will offer that, but the caregiver, singular intended there, is, no, I've got this. No, it's okay. Oh, thank you so much. If you could come for 5 minutes, that would be okay, but allow others to help. Don't let that guilt creep in, which says, I should be doing it all. That's not what we were built for. So don't take that on.
I think that's such an important distinction. Support isn't more advice, it's relief. It's being able to take that breath that you've been holding. I guess from one perspective, I'd love to kind of delve into one of the themes in your book is that chronological age is an incomplete measure. It can create expectations that lead to subtle ageism. In the foreword, there's a line, aging is not linear. What does that mean in day-to-day caregiving situations where families think every hard day equals decline?
We have been conditioned, and we do it to ourselves from our first birthday. We put one candle on the cake. We don't. Somebody puts it on for us. And then the second, third, fourth, fifth. And then you get up to 25. And at some point, oh, too many candles on the cake. We're not going to put them all on. But the fact is that we think of life in a linear progression. One year follows the next. But the way we live life, especially when we hit someplace about age 25, is in stages. Because when we are 29 and turn 30 or 45 and turn 46, somebody always says the day after your birthday, do you feel any different now that you're a year older, even though it's a day? And inevitably the answer is no, I don't feel any different. Same thing when you're 59 and 60 or 60 and 64. And so life is not a linear progression. We believe, and the book holds, that there are 7 stages. When it comes to childhood, from birth until age 25, there are 7 or 8 developmental stages that are well researched and talked about, from infancy to toddler to teenager, adolescent, a young adult. And yet when you hit 25, you seem to become adult. Then there's a midlife, and then there's old. And that's not the way we truly live life. And so in the book, we define these stages, and we also talk about the fluidity of stages, that we refer to as the flicker stage. And the flicker stage allows us, based on life circumstances, to move forward a stage or backwards a stage. And so you no longer need to celebrate each birthday. Feel free to do it if you must, but we would celebrate stages of aging.
I think that's beautiful because I was talking to one of my boys and they were like, "Oh, you're old." And I was like, "Thank you so much for your commentary." But no, because it is as you're growing up, every time you turn a year older, you hit the peak and then you come down the other side. And I feel like age is not a simple term anymore. And the book uses the feels like temperature analogy, wind chill, heat index, which I think is really brilliant. Can you explain the idea of feels like age in really simple terms for our listeners?
Happy to do that. If I was to ask you how old you are, and your answer would be 50 years
39,
old. And I said, but how old do you feel? And you might answer,
25.
and so we all live a feels like age. And that is true at 39, and that is true at 75. And people feel like they typically are a younger age. Every once in a while, somebody says, no, I feel older than I am, and that's fine too, because the analogy that you've used, which is with the weather, it's 50 degrees outside. However, with the wind chill factor, feels like it is 35 degrees. And in the summertime, I would say the reverse with humidity. And so the feels like age is how we live. That's how we actually see ourselves. Now, your children may see you differently, but the way you see yourself is a feels like age. And the feels like age is the way we live life. And our book, based on stages, again, is how you live life. And that is your feels like age. And so it gives the fluidity to stages. And the piece about the flicker phase allows you to move back and forth, as I said, based on your life circumstances. And it could be based on a medical condition that occurs. It could be on a family situation. Children move out, and all of a sudden you're feeling a little low and down, and therefore a little bit older. And then maybe a month, maybe a year later, you realize, look at all the freedom I have back again. And all of a sudden your feels like age will slide back because now you're out and about and running around with friends or vacationing or doing what you'd like because you don't have the responsibility to be home and watching out for the children.
I think having that idea of fluidity that also can apply when your loved one is suffering with a chronic illness because or chronic pain or they're going through a medical circumstance. Because I think in that fluidity, you do feel older when you're not feeling fabulous. And then when you have better days, you feel like I can take on the world. I'm great. I'm ready. Stop. I'm fine. You don't need to help me in this situation. For caregivers listening who are panicking after a bad week, what's a steadier way to interpret this fluidity to help them to not panic and stay in this they're having a bad week moment so that they can also enjoy this ebb and flow?
The flicker phase can be a temporary short-term phase, having a bad week or having a bad day, and we should be able to recognize that. If we can name it, which flicker does for us, then we could say, this is a temporary point in time. It could also have longer stage implications where you flicker to an earlier stage and stay there for months or years. And so for a caregiver, the temporary piece of it of this is just a bad day. And we know that phrase, I'm having a bad day, or this is a bad period of time. We capture that, but we don't know what to do with it. When we're having good days, we don't usually say this is a good day. We have a tendency to look at the bad side, but we need to recognize that it can be just temporary. And the best way to recognize is, when did you have one of these periods before? And it may have been 2 weeks ago when something occurred, and then a week and a half went by and I was fine. Okay, but I'm having a bad one now too. So if we can recall when we last had it and know that we came through it and now we're having another one, that's fine. Now, if those are happening too often, that's where we run into to the more complex situations of how do I take myself out of those bad days? How do I get out of this? And for that, there are solutions as well, again, with other assistance. I'd love to talk about there's a profession out there called geriatric care managers who are wonderful at helping to make sense of a complex system, the healthcare system, the social care system that most people are not trained in and yet are faced with having to seem like they have all the answers to. Who do I call if I've got this problem? Most people would not, unless you are in the healthcare system, you don't know that. But geriatric care managers are like consultants. If we have a financial problem or want to make a financial decision, we go and find a consultant, broker, or financial analyst, or somebody who can help us with our finance, a banker could help us with our finances. If we have a legal question, we go out and we find somebody qualified as an attorney to help us with our legal questions. So why is it that when we have a healthcare question, again, an area that most of us don't really know about, why don't we seek out a professional who has a holistic view of what resources are out there and what options exist so that we can make decisions and they can help you through? For some reason, we think that caregiving is something that should be innate and that we should just know. Perhaps it stems from when, if you've been a parent, you learn how to take care of a child. Somebody doesn't necessarily teach you that. Just do it. So maybe we think we're supposed to do the same thing on the other side when it comes to older adults, but we really don't do it that well. And instead, it works on us. Geriatric care managers are typically social workers, sometimes nurses, sometimes other professionals, therapists, occupational or physical. They can be of great assistance in navigating the system and helping you with decisions that otherwise you could spend too many hours going down the wrong road before you find the right road.
So right in taking that step to find an alternative way because it's not talked about very often. Even when you seek support from the GP or a specialist who works in geriatrics, it's not talked about. It isn't, they don't say, are you aware of these supports available for you? Did you know that you can access somebody who can help you to coordinate all of these aspects? Are you aware that you can talk to a social worker? It's not openly discussed. You come in, you have 15 minutes and you have to leave. Then you go and get blood work or scans or whatever is necessary in that space. But there isn't that explicit education or that explicit support for somebody to understand the pathways they can take. And it is really what you don't know, you don't know. And if most of the time it's when you meet another caregiver in that same space where they're like, why aren't you using this? And you're like, didn't know that was a thing. I'll go and look that up. And it's having access to that information. It's having that curiosity to say, I know you work in here every day and I know you just know this information, but I need you to share this information with me as well. And so this kind of ties into dignity. So I want to bring that into our space right now because support can accidentally become lost, the loss of identity for someone that we're caring for. So when you think about dignity in later life, what does it look like in the real world? Not as a concept, but in the day-to-day.
So value, purpose, those are things that enable us to feel a dignified and live a dignified life. When we have difficulty making decisions in the day-to-day life, when we have tasks that seem that they have been too overwhelming, but they can be broken down into small fragments and take them a step at a time. That will deplete your dignity because I used to be able to do this. That phrase, I was able to do this and now I can't. And now I feel like I am not as complete a person as I used to be, impacts a person's self-worth. We could do things like, again, meet people where they are by asking simple questions, not complex questions. Don't ask three questions at the same time or a question that has three parts, but break it down so that is easier. That will add to a person's view of themselves because now they are participating in the conversation. Now they are answering what you want and they don't have to think, I don't remember the other two parts of the question that you asked about. Similarly, there's a whole history to the person you are speaking with. It may be easier to talk about things in the past so that they can contribute to the conversation. Again, we do not have to be building rocket ships with our loved ones, engaging in conversation and allowing them to participate. Don't have them sit on the outside of the circle, figuratively or literally. Have them be part of the circle, but have conversations that make sense. Ask their opinion. Doesn't have to be complex opinions. It can be for simple questions. And so dignity is something that we all value. We've learned it through our independence, through our interactions, through societal relationships. And so to the extent that that gets pulled away a little bit, especially the independence part, which becomes a factor with older adults, that is something we have to respect. That we have to work at, and that shouldn't be so hard for the caregiver givers to bring into the daily routine.
It's so true that as we become older in life and we're not able to do 100% of the things that we used to do at the capacity we used to do it, that our independence does shrink away. And I was in a situation myself where I had firsthand experience of being the person that required care of after a car accident, that I ended up in a wheelchair and my independence went out the window. I couldn't drive. I couldn't get in and out of my house without somebody. And it really provided me this unique perspective of how that dignity and independence really feels in those spaces. And when we lose it, the shame, the embarrassment, the anger, the frustration, the overwhelm that I can't just go and buy a bottle of milk like I used to, and having to readjust your whole entire routines in order to find new ways. And it's very similar to when you do engage services to come and help, especially if your older loved one isn't living with you, to help them go take their groceries, to help them with bathing and showering, to help them to do just a gentle walk. And we don't really stop and think about how that feels to not be able to just get in your car, go down to the shops and purchase your food yourself. Maybe you don't have the strength or you've lost the feeling in your feet and you need that extra support. And I think as caregivers, having that unique perspective of living it, even if it's for a short time, to understand how that feels, how it kind of eats away a little bit at you when you can't do the things that you used to have capacity for. And we really need to have that gentle, loving understanding so that we can support them to work through those feelings of shame, overwhelm, anger, frustration, and be able to take it and look at things in a realistic way. And I'd love us to look at what are a few realistic ways caregivers can protect connection. So, say it's the daughter and the mother, the husband and the wife, even when there are mobility limits, when there's fatigue or there's safety concerns, particularly with cognitive decline, with Alzheimer's dementia, when we're looking at a broken hip, a knee replacement, the mobility limits that brings in, and the safety concerns of whether or not, if they've lost feeling in their feet, are they safe to move from bed to bathroom, bathroom to shower? What are some realistic ways caregivers can protect that connection?
Well, first, if I might, you just gave a perfect example of the flicker phase when you talked about the car accident and how you felt. I'm guessing the age that you gave me before and the 25 years old compared to the 39. When in the wheelchair and after the car accident, I'm guessing you weren't feeling 25 at that point, but your feels like age would have gone up, which is a perfect example of how it moves back and forth in a very fluid way. And so being able to appreciate the limitations that that moment for you occurred is very significant. Caregivers, there are all kinds of helping professions. And so when somebody is not sure if somebody has the ability for normal activities of daily living, such as transferring from a bed to a chair or standing or being able to shower independently, I think there's again, depending on communication abilities, that conversation with your loved one needs to take place. It can take place, it must take place at the time when you're already in the situation. But something we advocate for is having those conversations before anything ever happens on the concept of if and when this should happen, how would you like me to behave? And if you have that conversation early on, then if that should occur or something similar to it occurs, typically you can refer back to the conversation we had perhaps years before. And an example I will give you is, and this goes to the independence and dignity as well, but it's a very practical daily phenomena, and that is driving. We learn to drive depending on what country you're in at 15, 17, 18 years old. And when we get the keys to the car and we go off, the independence and what that does for our self-esteem is tremendous. Many have lived that glide path, if you will. And then it comes to a point where you should not be driving anymore. If you have that conversation when somebody is 50 years old or 60 years old, it's like there are people who get to a stage where they can't drive. And say, oh, yes, yeah, I know that. And then 10 years goes by and you say, there are people who get to a stage that, and if you have that conversation, when we get to that point, you say, it may not be safe not only for you, but also not safe for others. It is much easier for the person to be able to relate to as opposed to at age 80, somebody says to you, maybe it's time for you to stop driving. Well, that doesn't come across as nicely as, I could remember when we talked about that. And I've had personal experiences, which is why I use this example, where that has worked perfectly well. And I've had other experiences where that wasn't done and it results in family turmoil. And so having the conversations in advance, we talk about aging, we talk about life stages, we talk about people losing some capacity as they get older, talk about it and ask in the good times, how would you like me to deal with that if that were to happen? I know it's not going to happen to you and it's probably 20 years away. Talk about it in the absurd, if you will, but having the conversation and saying it and having individuals go through it. You could do it in groups. This doesn't have to be one-on-one. Group of friends could get together and say, well, how would you? And it just makes known your feelings. But more than making known your feelings, you're making them to others, you're making them known to yourself, and you'll be able to recall it.
I think that's really important because whilst they can be little conversations multiple times over multiple interactions, at times as a daughter or a loved one, uncle, aunt, whoever has the capacity or is needing to step in, if those conversations haven't happened and you're stepping in a crisis, it's much harder when they have steadfast views. I'm never going into a nursing home. I'm never not driving. And when they have that really strong, steadfast resolve, you don't understand where that came from. You don't know whether it was an experience that they witnessed of their parents that they didn't like. It might be that they're afraid. But if you haven't had those gentle, loving conversations with no pressure, I think it's really important that as caregivers, if we have a loved one who is getting older and potentially might need support in 10 or 15 years, now is the time to find out more about their story, more about their values, what they see as acceptable or not acceptable, not in a combative way, but in a gentle, loving way that helps with preventing that fight, flight, and freeze happening when you're in that crisis mode, because then they feel confident that you understand them at their core and will make decisions that will enhance their journey, not detrimentally impact their mental and emotional well-being by ignoring the fundamentals that they're wanting. So if they're wanting to stay at home, okay, well, what things do we need to make that a reality? Financially, what does that mean? Emotionally, what does that mean? And I think that value in a conversation and even understanding their stories so that if they have cognitive decline, you can talk about their past because they will still hold on to more of their past and make them feel in the present, in time, and give them something good to focus on when they're having those bad days. And this is where caregivers often freeze, especially when we're talking about services, needing housing or not needing housing, finances, and fear of getting it all wrong. When a caregiver thinks this can't continue like this, what are the first signal posts that it's time to explore extra support?
So, from a caregiver perspective, I would say if you think about how much time you have been spending with your loved one up till that point, did you have to be in the house? Just were you able to go out and leave somebody unto themselves for half the day? Then you find you can't go out but for an hour and come back. Then you find you can't go out. When you find that your time committed to the caregiving has increased, that would be the measure for me of knowing that you are taking on more than you should be taking on and you should be looking for additional help. If the person is becoming more combative with you, if you find that you are going away and your own mental health, like go into another room, you might have to blow off steam, you may have other ways of expressing it. But if that starts to happen more frequently, you are going down a path that is likely not going to revert. And so that is when you should be looking for additional services. And those services can range from simple housekeeping services to full-on home care services, having somebody in the home and assisting with either clinical needs or daily activity living needs, and anything in between. It could just be social. It could be visiting. It could be somebody who is a friendly visitor. But if you need more of that, you really need to be thinking about developing the plan that hopefully you have put some shape or form to earlier on. But if you see that those types of needs exist, then you should be putting together a plan. And hopefully you will do that with somebody who has knowledge of how to put together those plans. And in your Aging Advantage, we have sections where you can go through the planning and decision making so that it gives you some shape or form. Because again, we have not been taught how to do that. So anytime you're learning something for the first time, usually doesn't go as well as the second time, the third time, or the fourth time. Doesn't make a difference if it's care planning or putting together a bicycle. You're putting the bicycle together for the fourth time, you're going to do it much quicker than you did it the first time.
It's 100% correct. When we're talking about repeating the process, you get better with it over time. In the first stages, you're really learning the ropes and then working out where you're making stumbles, where you have to kind of build some extra skills or access more information. And I think it's really important to the independence and the dignity of your loved one to understand how you involve them in one decision, especially when they're scared or resistant or they feel ashamed. How do we do that so that dignity and independence stay intact?
We put dignity and independence together. We put the fluidity of aging together, and we call it a whole of aging approach to working with your loved ones. So it combines social aspects, it combines the independent access, it combines the medical aspects, and it's looking at all aspects of an individual and how they are living and how their living has changed based on whatever new phase they may be in at this point. And true, it is up to the loved ones to help shape that because in the examples that we are giving here, somebody has lost some of their ability to make those decisions for themselves. And so it's up to us, but we shouldn't make those decisions in isolation. It shouldn't be just how do I help them to get from the chair? You should think about what is that doing to their dignity? What is that doing to their feelings of independence? What is that doing to their purpose in life, to their role as a family member? Think about all of those pieces and then how do we contribute to supporting as best that can be supported. This isn't a silver bullet solution, but coming up with a plan that will support those multiple pieces at the same time. Because if we fix one piece, we're only fixing one piece. And we're probably not fixing it 100%. So now we've fixed one piece 50%. But there are multiple other pieces out there. And all of those, because you're dealing with a human being, and all of those pieces go to the points you're making regarding dignity and independence. I mean, those aren't tangible. Those are things that based on how somebody lives their life and how they see themselves and how others see them. So Meet them where they are. Back to that phrase.
If you're coming in a crisis, you still need to have those conversations to understand that and to be able to holistically care for them. Because holistic care isn't just their physical, it's their emotional, their psyche, how they feel in themselves, what's happening in their environment, what happens if we change that environment. It's really important to stop for a second and consider how something would feel for you if you lost it. So if a doctor said, I'm sorry, you can no longer drive, and yesterday I was allowed to drive and today I am not, stopping for a minute and pausing, how would that make me feel? Right now at my age, what would that do? What does that mean for me living independently? What does it mean for me emotionally to get from one place to another? Who do I now have to depend on for that process? And I guess I'd really love to look at, where do caregivers commonly get stuck? Is it the paperwork, the money, the family conflict? I don't want to be a burden. And what's the next right step when they feel stuck in these moments?
Look to the outside for an outside professional, because it could be any of the controversy within the family. It could be the financial. It could be the, understanding the system. Somebody who has done it before and is professional about it. I'll go back to the attorney or the financial advisor. We turn to them so freely and without any feeling or shame of, I don't know how to do that myself. And yet when it comes to helping a loved one, we feel like we should know how to do that. We should know how to call the GP. We should know how to reach out to the emergency room. And so we're looking for a different housing setting, a different community setting. We're looking for virtual care, which is a whole nother aspect that exists, and there are people who understand it very well. And all of a sudden, you're these days jumping on the internet and trying to figure it out for yourself. But somebody who understands that has those resources at their fingertips and can help to assist you and can take the burden off of you to become the expert overnight, because this is something we try to do overnight, and have access to those services as well. It's one thing to identify it, but it's another thing to have access to it. And access means timing as well as just getting to it. And timing can be critical for both your loved one as well as you as the caregiver, because the sooner you could find those solutions and put them together holistically, the better it'll be for you as well as for your loved one. So I say turn to a professional. That's what we want. Why did you turn to the attorney to write up a document for you? Some reason caregiving does not fit in that category for us. And it's classic, which again is why we've taken to putting it down in words. So what should society's responsibility be to caregivers and then to those who require care? What should service providers' responsibilities should they have? Should they be doing more or not? And then individuals. So we got the big picture service provider issue, and then we got the individuals. But at the individual level, people who are experts.
I think the other thing that's really important to consider, especially here in Australia, is that any type of support for aging population takes time, takes a lot of paperwork, and if you've never done it before, seeking support and getting professional help from people who do it day in and day out could mean the difference between waiting 12 months and waiting 3 months to get that support at home in a nursing home. Like, to find those elements, it's working out cost analysis. Is the cost of seeking this professional's help in the long run going to be beneficial to helping me to do this for the next few years, 10 years, 20 years, depending on how long they are still here with us? And I'd really like to close with tiny next steps that work for exhausted caregivers. What are 3 to 5 micro next steps a caregiver can take in like 1 to 3 minutes this week to reduce their overwhelm in this space?
Talk to somebody else who is in your situation. It is not difficult to find that person, and you may find a friend for life because of your commonality. Talk to your family members so that everybody can get on the same page. Now, that may not happen in 3 to 5 minutes, but it needs to start with the conversation or the question to other family members as to where they are in relation to the loved one. Read about geriatric care managers this week. Don't put it off until you need to have one. Read about it. just like you read about other topics of interest. You will be prepared then if and when that need comes. So those are three quick ones. And have a conversation with your loved one as well before the conversation needs to be had. It's a very bonding experience, and it shows the love that you have for the individual by asking that question. Not everybody is receptive to it. Certainly not the car key conversation. What would you like to do if I think you can't drive anymore? But just saying it, and at this point, you can smile about it, you can laugh about it, and it becomes a much easier conversation than if you're actually having the conversation that yesterday you could, but today you can't. Those questions.
And I think the other really important acknowledgement is that by understanding and having these conversations, you're putting yourself in a position to succeed and not reach burnout as a caregiver. And it also helps you to sustain the difference between a caregiver and being the daughter or the son, the caregiver and the partner, because you've had these conversations previously. And they don't have to be long. It could just be one question for this time when you're sitting with them. But it changes how that dynamic feels when you have to step into a caregiving role, because you can still maintain your partner or your daughter status without it impacting your relationship, because you've become a medical caregiver and not just the role that you were previously. What's one belief you'd love caregivers to release? Something that's adding shame or pressure as a caregiver of an elderly loved one.
Certainly, they don't have to have all of the answers. They don't need to be able to take away the existence of whatever the caregiving need is, that they can't fulfill it 100% themselves. We try, we say, no, I will be here. Somebody says, well, come out with me for a little bit. Let's do this. No, I need to be here. It just eventually becomes overwhelming. It will become overwhelming. Even when you say it's not overwhelming, stop saying it's not overwhelming, because it is. Caregiving is a very challenging part of life that too often we get into and don't know how to get out of while we're still providing for our loved ones. We're not running from it, but we can't fulfill it 100% with all of the things that we've talked about today. There are lots of other pathways that people could pursue that relieve them of trying to be there 100%.
I really like you've just said, acknowledging that this is overwhelming, that there is pressure here, that I don't know what I'm doing, and then that's okay. And by acknowledging it, you're lifting some of that shame or guilt or worry or concern from the journey that you're on, which will make your journey more manageable, more enjoyable, and less taxing on your body as a whole. And just before we close today, if you could leave caregivers with one sentence for the hard days, what would you want them to remember?
Know that what you are giving to your loved one is truly, truly valued, and it's appreciated, although you may not hear it. It is fulfilling for you, and it is helping them. Good to do, but like everything else, with good tincture of contribution.
I'd love to share with our caregivers where they can find you, where to connect with you, and where they can find your new book that's coming out.
Oh, well, I could be found at selfhelp.net. The organization is called Selfhelp Community Services here in New York City. And the book can be located at youragingadvantage.com. And either of the websites will take you to the other.
I will make sure to add all of Stuart's links down the bottom of our show notes for this episode so that you can click on them and you don't have to remember it when you finish the episode. Stuart, I wanted to say a massive thank you. This was such a steady conversation, especially for caregivers who are holding emotional weight and trying to make practical decisions they were never trained for. I wanted to just recap. Today we've covered what caregivers most commonly struggle with as needs increase, how to protect dignity, independence, and connection, depression, and how to think about services and housing without spiraling, and a few tiny next steps that create agency and reduce overwhelm for us as caregivers. And if you're listening and things feel like they're shifting week to week, I want you to remember this: aging is not linear. A hard day doesn't automatically mean the whole future. You don't have to solve everything today. You just need the right next steps, and you deserve support while you take it on. To everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. You don't have to hold it all alone. I'm Michelle, and this is Radiant Moments Caregiver Oasis. Until next time, take gentle care of your radiant moments and of yourself.